So I wanted to address an article that was posted on verysmartbrothas.com via The Root. I'm not sure how long, I've heard of this website. I'm not sure how long they've been associated with The Root. I'm not sure if they've been associated with The Root from the very beginning or if that's something new. I don't know, and it's really not relevant to this story. But this article has gone viral. And it's gone viral, and people have responded to it most people that I've seen and most people that I follow have responded to it very negatively for justified reasons, because there are a lot of problematic arguments within this article. And I think there's a difference between talking about problems within the black community and writing essentially clickbait, sensationalist articles with sensationalist headlines that really do nothing to address the problems within the community and instead do a whole lot more damage than they're actually creating a dialogue. And we have to be able to properly address articles like this, because articles like this are propping up and are becoming very common. And it's very questionable, because you have to wonder, articles like this get a lot of publicity. They get a lot of traction. They get a lot of attention because The Root is such a major platform, and even Very Smart Brothas, they get a lot of traffic. So when articles like this are written and people are going to read these articles, and I'm looking at it now, it's gotten like tens of thousands of views. And when stuff like this is written and the problems in these articles aren't addressed, and people start believing the stuff that's written in these articles, it becomes very problematic within the community. Stuff like this, I wonder sometimes, like, what people's ulterior motives are. Because if you notice, you notice certain platforms get propped up over other platforms, and when you look at who's getting propped up, you see certain trends, you see certain consistencies in the type of things that they write. So the clickbait sensationalist headline for this article is "Straight Black Men are the White People of Black People." Okay, so right off the bat, you can look at the headline for this article, and you can kind of see that this is not going to be an article with a lot of data in it. It's not going to be an article with a lot of facts in it. It's going to be an article where somebody's pretty much just writing down their opinion. And it comes off as an article that was written in like maybe 30 minutes to an hour. It doesn't really seem that this brother put a whole lot of thought into this article, But let me read it to you and break down why so many people have responded so negatively to this article. And we're going to really expose what I believe to be a truly divide and conquer, damn near COINTELPRO-esque agenda that's becoming very apparent within certain spaces within the African American community online. Okay, certain people are attacked, and while others are promoted, and people have to look critically at who's being propped up and what they're advocating, and the things that they're saying, and who's not, and the people who aren't, what they're saying, and compare the two, and you kind of see why certain people kind of have to fend for themselves online, whereas others, you see, they routinely pop up in a lot of major white liberal online platforms, and even online platforms that come off as being black owned that really aren't. And you kind of see that there's definitely an agenda at work here. But let me read this article first before I get into all of that, because I'm going to get into that as I read this. And then I'm also going to address an article that was written recently on the Huffington Post by a particular sister to basically defend and back up what this brother's writing. So in the first paragraph, he says, "It feels counterintuitive to suggest that straight black men as a whole possess any sort of privilege, particularly the type of privilege created for and protected by whiteness. In America, we are near or at the bottom in every relevant metric determining quality of life. Our arrest and incarceration rates, our likelihood of dying in violent death, our likelihood of graduating high school and attending college, our employment rates, our average net worth, our likelihood of surviving past 70. I could continue, but the point is clear." So right away in the first paragraph, you kind of see that he's getting all of that out of the way, because this is really one big yeah, but argument. He's getting all of that out of the way because he knows what the rebuttal to what he's about to say is going to be. Okay, so you can't, with what he's going to say later on down in these following, and I'm not going to read the whole damn article, and the article is not long, but I'm going to read sort of the meat and potatoes of what his argument is, and I'm going to break it down. Okay, and he's getting this out of the way because you can't really make the argument about black privilege and ignore all of these detrimental statistics. Completely blow away the notion of black male privilege. What they want you to believe black male privilege is, and when they say black male privilege, they're specifically talking about straight black men. And that's part of the divide and conquer mechanism. All right? They're specifically talking about straight black men who do things that annoy them. And it gets at the heart of you realize that a lot of people really don't know what white privilege is. Or they either don't know what white privilege is, or they do know what white privilege is, but they're intentionally defining privilege in a way to include black men in that category. All right? But I'm going to break that down later. Okay, by assessing our privilege or lack thereof, because there really isn't much privilege that black men have. There's really not anything that black men can do that black women can't do. I will continue to say this as I read this article, but specifically what white male privilege is, not just white male privilege, but what white privilege is white privilege is a power mechanism similar to white supremacy. It is something that white people, not only that they do that annoys us, which is how they want to define black male privilege. It's not simply something that they do that annoys us. It's a power mechanism that they have access to that black people don't have access to without a very high cost. You see, they leave that out of this discussion. They completely leave that out. Okay, but let me continue. But assessing our privilege or lack thereof on these facts considers only our relationship with whiteness and with America. Intraracially, however, our relationship to and with black women is not unlike whiteness's relationship to us. In fact, it's eerily similar. What the fuck? Did this dude literally just write that? Like, I'm feeling, when I'm reading this, I'm having the same reaction mentally and emotionally to what Andrew Young said a few weeks ago. You remember when I made a video, it's on my YouTube channel. You remember what Andrew Young said in the false equivalencies and the defenses that Andrew Young was trying to create to defend white supremacy and to defend neo-Nazis? Okay, I'm getting the same vibes from this article. And again, he's saying intra-racially, however, our relationship to and with black women is not unlike whiteness's relationship to us. In fact, it's eerily similar. It's not remotely similar. Not remotely. There is not a system that black men have in place, a legal system, a codified system, a system backed up by laws, by policies. There is not a system in place that black men have access to that oppresses black women on a global scale. Because that's what white privilege is, and that's what white supremacy is. White supremacy and white privilege are power mechanisms that artificially prop up white power and gives them power that we don't have. That is not the same thing as what he's talking about. And look, is there a discussion to be had about problems within the black community between black men and black women? There is a major discussion to be had about that. And I'm ready to have that discussion. And a number of black men are ready to have that discussion. But there's a difference between having that discussion and creating a false equivalency, trying to equate some fictitious notion of black male privilege with white privilege, and saying that there's an equal footing there. That you can point to something that you can point to historic rules and historic laws backed up by codes and backed up by local, state, and federal policies that black men enforce to a T over black women. Okay, this whole article is extremely problematic if that's the argument this dude is trying to make, and that's clearly the argument that he's trying to make. He says, we're the ones for whom the first black president created an entire initiative to assist and uplift. Oh my God, this guy is literally trying to say that my brother's keeper, okay, which many people have addressed this already in different videos. My brother's keeper is not directly, does not directly apply to black men. That is highly erroneous. And it is completely inaccurate. And if this dude had done a little bit of research, I'm not talking about days or weeks worth of research. If this guy had done a few hours of research, he would not have even put that sentence in his article. There is nothing in my brother's keeper that specifically applies to black men. It applies to boys of color, which we know when that label is applied, that applies to a whole lot of people, including gay black men. All right. It applies to Asian men or boys. It applies to Hispanic and Latino boys, Indians. Okay. There's nothing that Barack Obama did specifically for black men that black women don't have access to. Get out of here with that BS. That is a BS argument, dude. He says, we're the ones whose beatings and deaths at the hands of the police galvanize the community in the way that the beatings and sexual assaults and deaths that those same police inflict upon black women do not. That is a bold-faced fucking lie. Pardon my language, but that is a straight up BS lie. I assume this dude didn't see all of the black men tweeting and writing articles about Sandra Bland. I assume this dude missed all of the videos and the articles and all of the discussions that black men and how hard black men went for Rakia Boyd. Okay, and I know that Kanika Jenkinson's death isn't, that's not associated with the police. But, I did a video about that. And a number of black men have done videos. A ton of black men have done videos about Kanika Jenkinson's death. So don't sit up and tell me that black men don't ride for black women. Because if we want to go there, I don't think the community rode hard enough for Tamir Rice. People talked about Tamir Rice. Definitely. But you didn't see a major protest around Tamir Rice the way that you saw major protests around Mike Brown. And I understand we can't protest everything because quite frankly, and I'm going to show this statistic later, quite frankly, the number of black people being killed is so gross and grotesque in this country. It's impossible for us to start a protest around every murder. It's just not possible. We kind of have to pick our murders, unfortunately. Because it's so commonplace. Black life, black death is so commonplace in this country that we can't be everywhere at once. Okay, but this dude is straight up lying and spreading straight up propaganda in this article. Highly divisive propaganda. He says, we're the ones whose mistreatment inspired a boycott of the NFL, despite the NFL's long history of mishandling and outright ignoring far worse crimes against black women. Look, I don't expect the NFL to address certain things. The NFL is a league dominated by black men. So, when people talk about problems within the NFL, I expect people to mostly talk about it within the framework of black men, because black men dominate the NFL. So this whole that whole line was just a little ignorant. And then he ends, we are the ones who get the biggest seat at the table and the biggest piece of chicken at the table, despite making the smallest contribution to the meal. Okay, I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. I have no idea what he's even getting at there. The biggest piece of chicken. What is this dude getting on chicken and watermelon now? That sounds a little questionable. That sounds like sounds very similar to black male dehumanization that you hear from white supremacists. If we're keeping it real, we get the biggest piece of chicken at the table. What the heck is this dude talking about? And nowhere in this is more evident than when considering the collective danger we pose to black women and our collective lack of willingness to accept and make amends for that truth. It's a damning and depressing paradox. When speaking about race and racism, we want our concerns and our worries and our fears to be acknowledged. We want white people to at least make an effort to understand that our reality is different from theirs, and that white supremacy is a vital and inextricable part of America's foundation, and we grow frustrated when they refuse to acknowledge their role historically and presently in propagating it. So now he's equating black men not talking about the danger that we pose to black women, and he's equating that with white people not acknowledging white supremacy. Look, most people who are killed, and this has been proven numerous times in numerous studies, most people are killed by other people in their community. Most black people are killed by other black people. Most people who pose a danger to you are going to be people within your community and people within your circle who you associate with. That applies to the black community, that applies to the white community, that applies to the Asian community, that applies to the Latino community. That applies to everybody. Now again, is this a discussion to be had? Yes, I believe it's a discussion to be had. We need to talk about intra-racial violence. I'm not saying we don't. But to try to single out straight black men as if we're doing something that other groups of people aren't doing is problematic as hell. And just like this whole article is divisive and highly problematic and downright disrespectful. But if you're going for clicks, if you're going for views, if you're going for sensationalism, and you're not going for facts and you're not going for data, you write BS like this. Then he says, when the racism isn't blatant or doesn't appear to exist at all, we want them to give us the benefit of the doubt because we've trained ourselves to be able to sense it, even in minute and barely perceptible amounts, because our safety depends on our recognition of it. We share how it feels to be stopped by a police officer, or perhaps to walk into an all-white bar and have each eye trained on us, or perhaps to jaunt down the street in an all-white neighborhood, and we want them to understand how words and gestures they consider to be innocuous can be threatening, even if there's no intention of malice. Although we recognize that not all white people are actively racist, we want them to accept that they all benefit from racism, and we become annoyed when individual whites take personal exception and center ourselves in any conversation about race, claiming that to be one of the good ones, quote unquote, and wishing for us to stop and acknowledge their goodness. But when black women share and that we pose the same existential and literal danger to them that whiteness does to us, and when black women ask us to give them the benefit of the doubt about street harassment and sexual assault and other forms of harassment and violence we might not personally witness, and when black women tell us that allowing our cousins and brothers and coworkers and niggas to use misogynistic language propagates that culture of danger, and when black women admit how scary it can be to get followed and approached by a man while waiting for a bus or walking home from work, and when black women articulate how hurtful it is for our reactions to domestic abuse and their rapes and murders to be, quote, what women need to do differently to prevent this from happening to them, instead of, quote, what we men need to do differently to prevent us from doing this to them, end quote, their words are met with resistance and outright pushback. After demanding from white people that we're listening to and believed, and that our livelihoods are considered, our ears shut off and hearts shut down when black women are pleading with us. You see how he's trying to frame this false equivalency? This is a false equivalency. That's what it is. He's trying to create a black privilege false equivalency. Okay, you cannot equate street harassment. And look, do women get harassed? Yes, they do. Women get harassed, sexually way more than men do. But that is not the same as a system set up designed to let black men off the hook when black men when black men harass black women. And I'm talking about a legal system. You do not see black men get propped up by politicians, by the media, by everyone within society, and apologized when black women are raped. Like so let's say, for instance, if a black woman is raped, and if a black woman is a victim of domestic violence and domestic abuse, you will see a chorus, rightfully so, you will see a chorus of people coming to that woman's defense, as they should. Do you know what black male privilege would be? Black male privilege would be if a union or a mayor or a governor or Congress came out to that black man's defense to prevent that black man from going to prison. That's what real black male privilege would be. Black male privilege is not catcalling, which, yes, catcalling can be ignorant. Dudes go way too far a lot of times with that. And I can understand, and I feel for sisters who get annoyed by that. Okay, but don't begin to equate that with systems that allow people to get off for crimes. It is not the same thing. That is a false equivalency. Look, I'm done with this article. This article is just really stupid and really ignorant. And honestly, I've heard, like I said before, I've heard I've heard of very smart brothers before. I'm not saying every article on the website is trash, but this is a trash ass article. This was an article written to create a reaction specifically among black men, and it's largely been successful. It's largely been successful. I want to show you some stats. I was going to get to an article written on the Huffington Post. The article is entitled "A Woman's Response to," and then it's the title of the Very Smart Brothers article, "Straight Black Men Are the White People of Black People." And she's basically agreeing with everything that he's saying, and she's basically offering rebuttals to some of the things that he wrote in his article, based on not rebuttals to the things that he wrote in his article, but rebuttals to the rebuttals to his article. So you have people who have read his articles or his article, and they've clapped back at him, and she's basically coming to his defense trying to poke holes in some of the counter arguments. I was going to get to it. Let me quickly do that. One of the things that she says is, one of the things that she has in quotations, because she has several things listed in quotations. She has about 5 counter arguments in quotations, and she's listing her rebuttals in paragraph form. And one of the things that she has in quotations is like what I'm saying. This is propaganda to divide black men and black women. And she says, according to a 2017 CDC report, black women are 4 times more likely to be murdered than white women. I pulled up that CDC report, and if this is the same report that she's referring to, the title of the report is "Racial and Ethnic Differences in Homicides of Adult Women in the Role of Intimate Partner Violence (IPV), United States 2003 to 2014," and it came out July 21st, 2017. One of the things that she doesn't mention, okay, is that black people in general in America have one of the highest homicide rates in the world. She conveniently leaves this out. So yes, are black women murdered more than white women? Yes, they are. Now, if you look at the data, like I said earlier, most black people are murdered by other black people, including black women. Most white women, even though their homicide rate is lower, if you actually look at the data, even if you look at that CDC report, okay, white women actually have a higher percentage of intimate partner related deaths than black women. The percentage of black women who are murdered, black non-Hispanic women who are murdered by their partners, is like 55. I'm looking for the statistic now. It is, bear with me. Okay, it's 51.3%, and this number is based off the number and percentage of homicides of females greater or equal to 18 years of age by victim and incident characteristics. Okay, and it has white women, black women, American Indian, and Asian women, and Hispanic women. Okay, so overall, if you look specifically at black women, like I said, 51.6% are IPV related, interpartner violence, interpartner violence related. Not violence. Yeah, interpartner violence. So these are homicides. Okay, the percentage of homicides of all black women, 51.3% of them are IPV. But if you look at white women, even though white women are murdered less, the homicide rate is less, they actually have a higher percentage of IPV. Their IPV rate is like 56.8%. So you actually have more white women, okay, being murdered by their partners than black women, even though the number of black women being murdered is higher. That's important context that needs to be included when we have these types of discussions. Okay, now let me go to an article on 538. If you go to 538, now this article came out in 2015. It says black Americans are killed at 12 times the rate of people in other developed countries. Okay, that's the title of the article. And one of the paragraphs says, according to the CDC's Wonder database, 5.2 out of every 100,000 Americans were homicide victims, on average, from 2010 to 2012. Keep that number in mind. 5.2%, I keep saying percent, 5.2 out of every 100,000 Americans. Okay, that's just in general. It says that's not especially high by global standards. The median country had 4.7 homicide deaths per 100,000 persons over the same period. The highest homicide rate in the world was in Honduras with 87.9 homicide deaths per 100,000. God dang, that's high. That's extremely high. But look at this. Black Americans are almost 8 times as likely as white ones to be homicide victims. You see, what they want to do, they want to specifically look at black males, okay, because there's an agenda that and I'm not going to. I think I know what their agenda is. It's a divide and conquer mechanism, and you have people who are trying to get in with certain cliques, okay, who know that they can do that by writing these types of articles that very smart brothers wrote. And there's a huge segment of the black population, especially online, who eat articles like that up, and that's why articles like that get written. It's which is why I called it at the beginning of this video, which is why I called it clickbait, because that's what it is. And you have to leave to make that argument. You have to leave out certain bits of information, which is why, like I said earlier, the first paragraph, he knew that information. He specifically he wrote that drivel afterwards anyway. He knows the statistics, and he made that problematic argument regardless. You can't look at information. You can't look at these statistics and say, yeah, but look at this. Look at this graph. Homicide deaths per 100,000 population. United States black at the very top, 19.4%. 19.4 out of every 100,000. We are blowing. The black death in America is disgustingly high. And most of that is black men. Most of that is not black women. Most of that, those deaths are black men. United States Hispanic is 5.3. United States white is 2.5. Look at where black is, 19.4. That is disgusting. Okay, but they leave that out. They leave out the fact that black men honestly, black men pose more of a threat to other black men than black men pose a threat to black women, if we're keeping it real. But if you have an agenda, if you have an axe to grind against black men, you leave that shit out. Come on, y'all. Like, come on, stop with these divide and conquer wars that are being waged right now. Like, with everything that is going on to black people right now in this country, you have to ask yourself, with black people being gunned down in the streets by cops, with mass incarceration, with black unemployment being where it is right now, if you are writing these articles that it's not unifying black people, that's not trying to bring black people together, especially black men and black women, and you're writing these articles that do nothing that then cause more division, then you're not a solution. You're part of the problem. You're not helping to solve the problems in the black community. You're helping to cause division, and you're doing it because you have an ulterior motive and you have an agenda. Some of these dudes I think are getting paid to write this shit. And look, it's getting me heated. And I don't like to cuss as much as I am on my videos, but this article really got under my skin. I have some other statistics to show you guys. Listen to this. While people of color make up about 30% of the United States' population, they account for 60% of those in prison. This plays into another article that came out in 2015, actually, from the New York Times. 1.5 million missing black men. For every 100 black women not in jail, there are only 83 black men. The remaining men, 1.5 million of them, are in a sense missing. In cities like Ferguson, Missouri, 40 missing black men for every 100 black women. This gap, driven mostly by incarceration and early deaths, barely exists among whites. Come on now. Let's stop this. Let's stop this BS. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 1 in every 3 black men can expect to go to prison in their lifetimes. You can look at a statistic like that and say, yeah, but we have privilege. What privilege? Show me a law that puts black men. So you see what this is? People don't really understand what the hell white privilege is. That's what we're really getting at. They don't really know what white privilege is. I said earlier, white privilege is a power mechanism. It is something. And look, let me go back to that article from the Huffington Post where that sister was making that apologetic argument for this article. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. Yes, this is one of the rebuttals to Damon's article that she's responding to. In quote, it says, yes, I agree that black men have privilege, and I don't even necessarily agree with that too. To the extent that black men have privilege, it's an American Western privilege. So we have privilege that you see other people in other societies don't have because we have access to more resources in America. It's a Western privilege. It is not a privilege that black men have over black women that like, even if you look at catcalling, if you look at street harassment, which isn't as widespread as people like to make it seem like it is. If technically speaking, if black women wanted to street harass black men, there's nothing stopping them from doing that. There's nothing stopping black women from harassing black men. There's no law protecting black women from doing that. They don't do it, and that's something black men need to cut out. Black men need to chill on that shit. But there's no law or high hurdle preventing black women from doing that to black men. You see, that's what privilege is. And see, that's what this sister and this brother, Damon Young, that's what they're conveniently leaving out when they're trying to make these arguments. She says, yes, I agree that black men have privilege, but the white analogy is divisive, separatist, and hurtful. And she responds, I disagree. This analogy is perfect. Absolutely perfect. And then she goes on to say, first, white people deflect, suggesting that talking about white privilege is separatist because we all have different privileges. Why call out white privilege? All lives matter, right? Second, they discuss struggles they have had as a white person. And then she goes on to give an example. And then she says, privilege is a special advantage. Let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. Privilege is a special advantage available to a group of people. I hear our black men giving the same excuses as white folks, and that is why this analogy works. No, you have it completely backwards. That tells me that you don't really know what white privilege is. Or like I said earlier, you do, and for whatever reason, because you're trying to cozy up, you're trying to assuage the white guilt of your white liberal friends. You're trying to make a false equivalency that's not there. Because if you knew what white privilege was, you wouldn't say privilege is a special advantage available to a group of people and just ended at that. Because that's not just what white privilege is. White privilege is a special advantage to a group of people that other groups of people don't have access to. That's what it is. Or we do have access to it, but the hurdle to using that privilege is so high it's damn near non-existent. So, for example, if you wanted to say there was a black privilege where black people could mass incarcerate white people, and we were privileged enough to not have to worry about that because we get the benefit of the doubt in the legal system. Technically speaking, there's nothing preventing that from happening. But look at what you would have to go through. Look at what black people would have to go through to implement that. We'd have to control all levers of government. We'd have to control politics at the local, state, and federal level. We'd have to control police and law enforcement. We'd have to control Congress. We'd have to control the White House. That's never going to happen. So essentially, that privilege is not going to exist. It is something that we do not have access to because it is power that we do not have. That is what white privilege is. It is the ability for people to use their power in a way that puts them in an advantageous position that other people can't do and other people can't replicate. But you have to leave all of that out. If you have an axe to grind against straight black men, you have to leave all of that out because you can't really include that when you're trying to make your argument, because your argument falls apart. Look, there are a lot of things that we need to have discussions about in the black community. There are discussions that need to be had. Black men and black women need to come together. But guess what? Articles like this ain't doing it. Leaving out, I could continue for another hour just on purely on the statistics. Okay? Purely just on the statistics. Look, purely just on the statistics. According to recent data, the Department of Education, African American students are arrested far more often than their white classmates. African American youth have higher rates of juvenile incarceration and are more likely to be sentenced to adult prison. We can continue endlessly. These statistics blow away the fictitious notion of black privilege. Social problems, being upset about different annoyances that black men annoy you with, is not a privilege that black men have over you. And everything that you can look to say that there is black male privilege over black women, that involves a crime, black men are going to be prosecuted for. Which is why I brought up rape and murder and domestic violence. Black men are held accountable for that shit. We're not protected from that, nor should we be. So anything that's not crime related, like rape, murder, domestic violence, anything that's not crime related, and anything that's kind of just like a social nuisance, that's not privilege, dude. Because that's, technically speaking, that's stuff black women could do to black men too. There's nothing stopping black women from, quote unquote, street harassing black men. They don't do it because they have better sense than a lot of black men. A lot of black men out here are knuckleheads and do dumb crap. And we think that just because we are men, then we can get away with certain things. And that's not true. But that's not the same thing as privilege. Do not equate the two. Privilege means something specific. And if you cannot back up your quote unquote privilege with policy, if you don't have judges in power that are going to protect you from incarceration, that are going to protect you from being held accountable, you don't have real privilege. That's not privilege. Articles like this are a problem. They are a huge problem. This article should never have been written. This dude knows better. He clearly knows better, which is why he put that information in the first paragraph, because he knows better. He knows, he's smart enough to know that he's making a problematic argument, but he did it anyway. And you can look, and I'm gonna end it at this. We really have to watch out for suspect characters within the community. We have to watch out for people who are this, and I'm gonna just reiterate what I said at the beginning. People who are propped up by white-owned corporations like the Huffington Post, because don't forget about something here. Social media is extremely powerful, especially Twitter. Twitter has the ability to define narratives. And I get the impression a lot of times that there's an incentive right now to make sure certain narratives from certain groups of black people don't become dominant within the community. And so you have certain groups of people being propped up by a lot of white liberals and white progressives to make these arguments. Like, I doubt the Huffington Post will post an article that I wrote that knocked down this very smart Brothas article. I can submit it and wait to get no response in my inbox. They wouldn't post an article from me. And a lot of these organizations, because they have a problem with black people who are not on that bullshit and who are unapologetically black. You have a lot of people who ride that liberal bandwagon, who try to pretend that who try to pretend they're down for the cause, but when you really look at who they prop up and who they associate with, it's specifically certain types of people. And we have to begin to call that out, family. I'm going to end it here. We can decide to do one of two things. We can either unify or we could go the way of the dinosaurs. And we can continue to let divisiveness and strife and bickering within the community tear us apart, because that's really the road we're going down right now. And articles like this are fanning the flames of that destruction. So let's talk about problems between black men and black women. I don't really feel like that's my lane. I try to stick to politics, and I try to stick to state violence, and I try to stick to specifically problems attacking black people. But we do need to talk about intra-racial problems. I'm not saying that's not an issue, but there's a way that those arguments need to be had, and it's not in a clickbaity, false equivalent way where you're trying to equate fictitious black male privilege with white privilege. Cut that out. Stop doing that. It's not helping the conversation at all.